There are betrayals in this world that leave wounds deeper than any blade. And the cruelest betrayals don't come from enemies, they come from family. My name is Harold Givens. I am 67 years old, a retired machinist from Boise, Idaho. I've lived a life of routine early mornings, strong coffee, the smell of motor oil and steel. My wife Marianne used to call me a creature of habit. She passed 5 years ago, leaving me with memories that keep me warm on cold nights and a daughter who is the last piece of her I have left. Her name is Claire, my only child, the one person I thought I could trust without question. But trust is fragile. It can shatter in an instant. One morning, I discovered loans in my name $700,000. Debt I never signed, promises I never made. And at the center of it all was Claire, smiling, charming, convinced she deserved more than the steady life I had built. This is not just a story about money. It is about blood, betrayal, and the desperate search for forgiveness in the ruins of family love. The mornings in Boise had a rhythm to them that I had come to rely on. At 67, I no longer had a clock-in shift or a supervisor breathing down my neck. But habits, especially the kind forged over 4 decades on factory floors, don't just fade when retirement comes. I still rose before dawn, before the sun had spilled across the horizon, when the neighborhood was a quiet quilt of sleeping houses. I would brew a pot of black coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, and sit in the kitchen with the newspaper. The headlines rarely surprised me anymore, politicians arguing, markets rising and falling, wars in places I would never visit. Still, the ritual mattered. The world was chaotic, but my kitchen was steady. Sometimes I caught myself setting an extra cup on the counter, as if Marianne might shuffle in behind me in her bathrobe and glasses, hair a mess, muttering about how coffee on an empty stomach was an old man's way to an early grave. It always hit me then, the quiet, the hollow seat across from me. She'd been gone 5 years, but grief doesn't measure itself in time. It lingers like a shadow. After coffee, I'd walk the block. My neighbors waved politely. Mrs. Drummond with her little dog, Mr. Alvarez watering his lawn even though the city had warned us about water usage. These were the tiny constellations of my retired life. Small, predictable, safe. Claire called about once a week, sometimes more if she needed something. My daughter was 38, smart, ambitious, restless. She had inherited Marianne's quick wit, but not her patience. Where Marianne had been content with a modest house, home-cooked meals, and evenings on the porch, Claire had always dreamed bigger. She wanted the world, and she wanted it quickly. Her calls usually began the same. "Hi, Dad. How are you? Listen, I've been thinking." And then came the request. A little money for a business idea. Help with a car down payment. Tuition for yet another certification course she swore would change her life. I didn't mind helping. She was my daughter. But sometimes, when I hung up the phone, I wondered if she saw me as anything more than a safety net. That Friday morning, things seemed no different. I was halfway through my coffee when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I prefer silence in the morning, but the caller ID flashed First Meridian Bank. Strange. I hadn't done business with them in years. "Mr. Harold Givens?" the voice asked, polite but sharp, like someone trained to stay calm even when the sky was falling. "Yes, this is he. We're calling to confirm the terms of your loan. $700,000, secured under your name and residence, finalized last week. Our records indicate we've already begun disbursement." The words didn't make sense. I chuckled, thinking it must be a mistake. "You've got the wrong man. I don't take loans, haven't since the 80s. A pause. Papers shuffled on the other end. Then the voice came again, firmer this time. Mr. Givens, your signature and identification were verified. I can email you a copy of the documents for your review. I felt a heaviness settle in my chest. $700,000. My house wasn't even worth half that. Email it, I said, my voice cracking. When I opened the document, I froze. My name, my address, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It was close, nearly perfect, but off just enough for me to know. Like a reflection in warped glass. Someone had forged it. I sat there, the coffee cooling beside me, my hands trembling. How? Why? Who would dare? The answer came too quickly, before I even wanted to think it. Claire. She had always talked about needing a big break, about being tired of scraping by, about how she deserved more than living paycheck to paycheck like you and Mom did. I had brushed it off as youthful frustration, but now the pieces fit too neatly. I told myself no, it couldn't be. She was my daughter, my only child. Marianne's flesh and blood. But doubt has a way of spreading like cracks in glass. The phone rang again. This time it was Claire. Her voice bubbled with cheer, almost rehearsed. Hi, Dad. Just wanted to check in. How's your morning? I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. Fine. Why are you calling so early? Oh, no reason. Just thought of you. Been busy with work, you know. Opportunities are opening up. Big things coming my way, Dad. I wanted to scream. To ask her outright. To demand the truth. But instead, I said nothing. I let her talk about her new venture and how things were finally turning around. When I hung up, I sat staring at the walls of my kitchen, the silence pressing in. That day marked the beginning. The day ordinary life cracked open, revealing rot underneath. I didn't know yet how far it would go, how deep the betrayal would cut. But I knew one thing. The steady rhythm of my mornings, the quiet security of my small life was gone. Forever. The next morning I didn't bother with coffee. My stomach was too knotted. I dressed in my old brown jacket, the one Marianne used to tease me about, and drove downtown to First Meridian Bank. The building was glass and steel, a gleaming fortress that looked nothing like the friendly neighborhood banks I remembered. I felt small, walking through the revolving doors. An old man in worn shoes stepping into a world of polished floors and suits that cost more than my car. A young woman at the reception desk greeted me with a professional smile. Good morning, sir. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, my voice rough. But someone's stolen my life out from under me. I need to speak to whoever handles fraud. That got her attention. Within minutes, I was ushered into a conference room with a man in a Navy suit who introduced himself as Mr. Holloway, senior loan officer. He had the kind of calm, practiced demeanor that suggested he'd dealt with dozens of panicked clients before. Mr. Givens, he began, sliding a folder toward me. These are the documents related to your loan. Perhaps we can clear up any confusion. I opened the folder and there it was again, my name, my address, my signature. But this time I noticed something else. An email address that wasn't mine, a phone number I didn't recognize. Attached were scanned IDs, my driver's license, my social security card. Perfect copies. Where did you get these? I demanded. They were provided during the application process, Holloway said smoothly. The verification matched. Matched? Look at it. I shoved the papers back at him. That's not my handwriting. That's not my email. Someone forged this. He adjusted his glasses. I don't doubt your sincerity, Mr. Givens, But from a legal standpoint, these documents are binding until proven otherwise. If this is fraud, you'll need to file a police report. In the meantime, the loan is active. Active. The word hit me like a hammer. $700,000 of debt tied to my name, my house. Everything Marianne and I had built gone in a stroke of a pen. I left the bank with copies of the documents clutched in my hand. Outside, the sun was too bright, the traffic too loud. The world moved on as if my life hadn't just collapsed. Back home, I spread the papers on the kitchen table. I studied every detail, the forged signature, the unfamiliar email, the phone number. My heart pounded when I noticed the name of the business listed under Loan Purpose, Everlight Consulting LLC. I had heard that name before. A few weeks back, Claire had called, excited, telling me she and a partner were starting a consulting company. Big contracts coming in, she'd said. We're going to change lives, Dad. Finally. Everlight. My throat went dry. Still, I clung to denial. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe someone else used her name. Maybe this was all coincidence. But coincidence is a fragile shield. That evening, I called her. Claire, what's Everlight Consulting? There was a pause, just long enough to tell me she hadn't expected the question. Oh, just a project I'm working on, she said lightly. Why? I saw the name today. At the bank. Another pause. Then her voice sharpened. Why were you at the bank, Dad? To check on something. I forced calm into my tone. Claire, tell me you didn't. Didn't what? She snapped, defensive now. Why are you grilling me? I'm an adult. I can run my own business. Not with my name, I said softly. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then she exhaled, a sharp hiss of frustration. You don't understand, Dad. This is bigger than you. Bigger than both of us. It's an investment, a chance to actually make something of myself. I closed my eyes, my chest aching. You forged my signature. You think I wanted to? Her voice cracked, anger and desperation colliding. Do you know what it's like, watching everyone else succeed while you're stuck? You had your life. You had Mom. You had security. What do I have? A dead-end job and a father who thinks scraping by is enough. Claire, 18 day. 18 day. I'll pay it back, she said quickly, almost pleading. The business will take off. No one will get hurt. Just trust me. Trust. The word cut deeper than the lie itself. When the call ended, I sat in the dark kitchen. The papers spread before me like evidence at a trial. She hadn't denied it. Not really. She had justified it. Excused it. That was worse. I thought of Marianne. What would she say if she were here? She had always defended Claire, always believed in her potential. Would she see this as ambition gone astray, or as betrayal? I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of it pressing down. My daughter, my only child, had stolen my future. And yet, even in the depth of my anger, a part of me still wanted to protect her, to shield her from the storm she had summoned. Because no matter what she had done, she was still my daughter. But love and loyalty have limits, and mine were beginning to crack. The police station smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. The kind of place where lives unraveled daily, where people walked in with hope of justice and walked out with nothing but paperwork. I stood at the front desk, clutching the folder of forged documents like it was a lifeline. The officer on duty barely looked up from his computer. Yes, sir? I need to file a fraud report, I said. My voice felt small, brittle. He slid a clipboard toward me. Fill this out. Someone will be with you shortly. I sat on a hard plastic chair, pen shaking in my hand. The form asked for names, dates, amounts. Every number I wrote made my chest tighten. 700,000. 700,000. When the officer finally called me in, he was younger than I expected, early 30s, buzz cut, eyes sharp but not unkind. His nameplate read Detective Mason. Mr. Givens, he said, taking the folder. Let's go over this together. No. For the next hour, I explained everything: the bank, the forged signature, the company name that matched Claire's so-called business. I avoided her name as long as I could, but Mason wasn't blind. Everlight Consulting, he said, flipping through the papers. You said your daughter mentioned this company? I nodded reluctantly. Do you believe she's involved in this fraud? The words stuck in my throat. A father should never have to say them, but the truth was written on every page in front of us. Yes, I whispered. I think she did it. Mason leaned back in his chair, studying me. That's not an easy thing to admit. I swallowed hard. She's all I have left. Her mother, my wife, passed 5 years ago. I never thought she'd do this. He scribbled notes. If she's involved, this is serious. Loan fraud, identity theft, possible conspiracy if she had a partner. We'll need to open a case, pull financial records, track the money. It won't be quick, and it won't be quiet. Quiet, I echoed, the shame rising in my throat. Boise was small enough that word traveled fast. What would the neighbors say? What would Marianne's friends think if they knew our daughter had betrayed us? Mason must have read my face. I know this is painful, sir, but if you don't pursue this, the debt is on you. $700,000 doesn't just disappear. I nodded, forcing myself to breathe. Do what you have to do. And as I signed the official statement, my hands trembled. It felt like I was carving a scar into my family, one that could never heal. That evening, I sat in the living room with a glass of whiskey I hadn't touched since Marianne's funeral. The burn in my throat felt like penance. The phone rang once, twice. I let it go to voicemail. It was Claire. Her voice filled the room, cheerful, almost oblivious. Hey, Dad. Just checking in. We've got a big meeting tomorrow, huge investor interest. You'd be so proud if you could see what we're building. Call me back, okay? I turned off the machine. Proud. The word was a knife. The next day, Mason called with an update. We traced the loan disbursement. The money was wired into an account connected to Everlight Consulting, registered under a partner's name, Axel Monroe. Do you know him? I froze. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Mason said it carried weight. No, I admitted. Well, we do, Mason said grimly. Monroe's been on our radar for a while. Shady startups, pump and dump schemes, fraud. If your daughter's involved with him, she's in dangerous company. Dangerous. The word chilled me. Claire wasn't just reckless. She was walking into the jaws of a predator. That night, I tried to sleep, but the house was too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me of Marianne's absence. I rose and wandered into the garage, where her old garden tools still hung on the wall. Her gloves, still faintly stained with soil, sat folded on the shelf. What would you do, Marianne? I asked the silence. Would you protect her, or would you let her face the fire she lit? The silence offered no answer. But I knew, deep down, that protecting Claire now meant destroying myself. And if I destroyed myself, there'd be nothing left to save her with later. 2 days later, Mason called again. We're preparing to bring Monroe in for questioning, but we'll need Claire too. She'll be served a summons within the week. The words hit like a physical blow. Seeing Claire in a police station, being interrogated, it was more than I could bear. That evening, I drove to her apartment. It was in a new complex, shiny but soulless, the kind of place where rent was paid with other people's money. She opened the door in a tailored blazer, her hair perfect, her smile bright until she saw the folder in my hand. "Dad," she said cautiously, "we need to talk." Her eyes flickered to the folder, then back to me. "If this is about the bank, it's about everything," I interrupted. My voice cracked with the weight of it. "The police are involved, Claire. They know about Monroe. They know about the account. This isn't just between us anymore." Her face hardened. "You went to the cops?" "What choice did I have?" I snapped, my anger finally breaking free. "You stole from me, from your own father. Do you even understand what you've done?" For a moment, her mask slipped. Fear flickered in her eyes. But then she straightened, jaw tight. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "We were this close, Dad. This close to making it big. And now you've destroyed it." I stared at her, stunned. Not remorse, not apology. Blame. The girl Marianne and I had raised was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. "Claire," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "What happened to you?" She didn't answer. She just slammed the door. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the silence. And for the first time, I wondered if there was anything left to save. The first time I saw him was in the lobby of the police station. Axel Monroe wasn't in handcuffs, wasn't flanked by officers. He was just sitting there, legs crossed, scrolling on his phone like he owned the place. Detective Mason spotted him before I did. "Well, speak of the devil," he muttered. Axel looked up and smiled, a smile too polished, too confident. He stood, extending a hand like we were old friends. "Mr. Givens, I presume?" I didn't shake it. His hand hovered a second longer, then dropped. Mason stepped between us. "Mr. Monroe, thanks for coming in voluntarily. Let's have a word in my office." Axel nodded smoothly. "Of course. Always happy to cooperate." Cooperate. The word dripped with arrogance. As they walked away, Axel glanced back at me and winked. It wasn't a friendly wink. It was a message. I'm untouchable. An hour later, Mason emerged, shaking his head. Slippery as an eel, he admits nothing. Shifts, blame everywhere. Talks in circles. But make no mistake, he's at the center of this. We just need proof. "And Claire?" I asked. Mason sighed. "He claims she's just a minor associate, that she barely knows what's going on. But I don't buy it. He's protecting her or using her, maybe both." That night, I couldn't get Axel's face out of my mind. The charm, the confidence, the way he seemed to know he was 2 steps ahead. If Claire was tangled up with him, she wasn't just reckless. She was in danger. A few days later, I received an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message typed in bold letters. "Stop digging. Family matters should stay in the family." My hands shook as I read it. I drove straight to Mason. He examined the letter, jaw tight. Classic intimidation tactic. He wants to scare you into backing off. "Well, it's working," I admitted. "But I can't just let this go." Mason clapped a hand on my shoulder. That's why we're here. Don't confront him yourself. Let us handle Monroe. I nodded, but the resolve in me was hardening. If Monroe thought he could scare me, he underestimated what a father would do for his child, even one who had betrayed him. 2 nights later, I got a call from Claire. Her voice trembled. Dad, I need help. My heart lurched. Where are you? There was a pause, then a muffled voice in the background, male, sharp, commanding. Axel, I can't talk, she whispered. Please, don't make things worse. Just trust me. I'll fix it. The line went dead. I sat in the dark, the phone still in my hand, pulse racing. She was in over her head, and Monroe was pulling the strings. I decided to see him face to face. Against Mason's warning, I found the address of Monroe's so-called office, an upscale suite downtown, glass walls and leather chairs. When I walked in, he was behind a desk, sipping bourbon, smiling like he'd been expecting me. Mr. Givens, he drawled. I was hoping we'd talk. Where's my daughter? I demanded. He chuckled. She's fine. Better than fine. She's learning the ropes, making real money, seeing the world beyond your small-town garage. You should be proud. Proud? My voice cracked. You bled me dry. You used her to forge my name, to steal my future. And now you want me to be proud? He leaned back, unbothered. You see theft. I see investment. Claire has potential. She just needed someone to unlock it. You gave her safety, stability. I'm giving her ambition. Don't confuse the two. I slammed my fist on his desk. You're destroying her. For the first time, his smile slipped. His eyes hardened, cold as steel. Careful, old man. She came to me. She chose this. If you want to blame someone, blame her or yourself. Maybe you didn't give her enough reason to stay loyal. The words cut deeper than any knife. He was right in the cruelest way. Somewhere along the line, I had lost Claire. I left before my rage got the better of me. That night, I sat alone in the garage, staring at Marianne's garden gloves. I imagined what she'd say if she could see us. Now her daughter corrupted, her husband powerless. I wanted to believe Claire was still in there, beneath Monroe's influence. But each day, it felt like she was slipping further away. The next morning, Mason called. We've traced more funds moving offshore. Monroe's setting up to vanish. If Claire's with him when he bolts, she'll be dragged down too. We need to move fast. I knew then that the battle wasn't just against Monroe. It was against time. And against the part of Claire that still believed in him. Days blurred into each other. I went through the motions of life coffee at dawn, tinkering with the old Mustang in the garage. But every tick of the clock felt heavier, like time itself was pressing me down. Claire hadn't come home. I hadn't seen her in over a week. Mason kept me updated, but updates weren't comfort. He said Monroe was moving money, forging documents, prepping for something bigger. He also said Claire had been spotted with him more than once. Each report chipped away at me. One night, the phone rang again. Claire's number. My chest tightened as I answered. Dad? Her voice was low, fragile. Claire, where are you? Are you safe? A long silence. Then, you shouldn't have gone to Axel. I froze. He's destroying you. You don't see it, but he is. He's using you, Claire. Please come home. Her breath caught, like she was crying. You don't understand. Axel believes in me. He says I'm not just some burden to be pitied. He says I can have more. You've always had more. You had love. You had family. Family that never thought I was enough. she whispered, bitterness bleeding through. You always compared me to Mom. You always saw her in me, not me for myself. Axel, he sees me. Ugh. The line trembled with her words, then went dead again. I sat there, stunned. Had I really made her feel that way all these years? The next day, Mason drove me downtown to show me something. We parked across from a tall building, all glass and steel. Look there, he said, pointing. Through the windows of a restaurant, I saw them, Claire and Monroe, at a table, laughing. She leaned toward him, hanging on every word. My stomach turned. Mason's tone was calm, professional. We're building a case. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. We'll get him. But she's not just a bystander. If she doesn't pull out soon, she'll go down with him. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Then I'll pull her out myself. Mason shook his head. Don't. If you confront her with him around, he'll twist it. He'll turn you into the enemy. But I couldn't just sit back anymore. That night, I drove to her old apartment. Lights were off. The mailbox overflowed. I left a letter on her doorstep. Claire, if you can't come home, at least meet me once. No Monroe. Just you and me. Please. Your dad. 2 days later, she showed up at the garage. She looked different. Designer dress, expensive purse, hairstyled like she'd stepped out of a magazine. But her eyes, those were the same. Tired, searching, broken. Dad, she whispered. I didn't rush to hug her. I just nodded, trying to keep steady. You came. She stood awkwardly by the doorway, as if afraid to cross the threshold. I don't have long. Axel doesn't like me being here. That's the problem, Claire. He controls you. You don't see it, but he's pulling the strings. She bristled. He doesn't control me. He respects me. Do you know what that feels like? To finally matter? The words stabbed. I took a deep breath. You've always mattered. Maybe I failed at showing it enough, but you were never less in my eyes. Her lip trembled, but she shook her head. You're saying that now because you're scared of losing me. I stepped closer. I'm saying it because it's the truth. Claire, you're my daughter. You're all I have left of your mother. I would burn the world to keep you safe. But Monroe, he'll burn you to keep himself safe. Do you understand the difference? She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. For a moment, I thought I reached her. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, saw his name, and her expression hardened. I have to go, she said, already backing away. Claire, please. But she was gone. Again. That night I dreamed of Marianne. She stood in the garden, sunlight on her hair, looking at me with those steady eyes. Don't give up, she whispered. She's still ours. I woke with tears on my face. A week later, Mason called with urgency in his voice. He's moving. Monroe bought one-way tickets under fake names. Claire's listed as his associate. If she gets on that plane, Harold, she's finished. My blood ran cold. Where? Seattle. Flight leaves in 2 days. We're coordinating with federal agents, but we need her cooperation to separate her case from his. I didn't wait for instructions. I drove straight to the airport the next morning, hoping, praying that she'd be there early. And she was. Standing beside Monroe at the ticket counter, suitcase in hand, looking like she belonged to his world. My heart nearly broke in two. I walked toward her, each step heavy, knowing this could be the last chance. Claire! I called out. She turned, startled. Monroe's smile froze when he saw me. Dad, she whispered. Monroe draped an arm around her, smug as ever. You really should stop following us, Mr. Givens. It's pathetic. I ignored him. My eyes were only on her. Claire, you don't have to do this. Please, come with me. We can fix this. Together. Her hands trembled on the suitcase handle. I saw the war in her eyes between loyalty to the man beside her and the love buried deep in her heart. For a long moment, time stopped. Then she whispered, I don't know if I can. Monroe's grin widened, and I realized the battle wasn't just about saving her life. It was about saving her soul. The airport buzzed with the chaos of mourning travelers, families with strollers, businessmen dragging briefcases, students hugging their parents goodbye. But to me, the world narrowed to one small circle. Claire, Monroe, and myself standing under the fluorescent lights of the ticket counter. Claire, I said, steadying my voice, you don't have to do this. Monroe gave a sharp laugh, tightening his arm around her shoulders like she was a prize he had won. Of course she does. She's finally stepping into the life she deserves. Not chained to a dead man's garage, not saddled with a broke, washed-up old mechanic. He smirked at me. No offense. I stepped closer, ignoring him. Claire, look at me. Please. Just look at me. Her eyes flickered toward mine, shimmering with conflict. Her grip on the suitcase trembled. Dad, you don't understand. I understand more than you think. You feel seen with him. You feel powerful. But it's a lie. Monroe doesn't love you. He loves what you can do for him. Her chin wavered, but before she could speak, Monroe cut in smoothly. See, Harold, that's where you're wrong. She's more than a pawn. She's my partner. Isn't that right, Claire? He angled her face toward his. She nodded faintly, but her eyes told a different story, eyes pleading, trapped. Claire, I said, softer now. Your mom once told me that family isn't about perfection. It's about standing together when everything else falls apart. That's what I want with you. No matter what you've done, no matter how far you've gone, I'll still stand with you. But I can't do it if you get on that plane. Monroe rolled his eyes. Touching speech. Unfortunately, we've got a schedule to keep. He tugged at her arm. Let's go. But before they could move, a voice called out from behind me. Axel Monroe. We all turned. Mason strode into view, flanked by two federal agents. The badge flashed, sharp and undeniable. The nearby travelers slowed, curious eyes turning toward the scene. Monroe's smirk faltered for just a second before returning. This is harassment. You've got nothing on me. Mason's voice was calm, but firm. We've got enough. Fraud, identity theft, interstate wire transfers, laundering through offshore accounts. And you, Claire Givens, are implicated as an accomplice. Claire's face drained of color. What? Monroe squeezed her arm tighter, his voice slick. Don't listen to him. It's a bluff. They want to scare you into turning on me. Mason stepped forward, gaze fixed on her. Claire, you have a choice. Right now, stay with him, and you'll face the same charges he does. But if you step away, if you testify, you can walk out of here with your father. The words hung in the air, heavy as chains. I reached out my hand to her. Claire, come with me. Her whole body shook. Tears welled in her eyes. For one agonizing moment, she looked like a little girl again, standing on the porch after skinning her knee, waiting for me to pick her up. Monroe leaned close, hissing into her ear. Don't be weak. You're mine. Without me, you're nothing. Her breath hitched. She stared at the floor. Then, in a trembling whisper, she said, Number. Monroe froze. What? She jerked her arm free, stumbling toward me. I'm not yours. Not anymore. The agents moved instantly. Monroe cursed, shoving against them, but they pinned him to the cold tile floor. The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed across the terminal. Claire collapsed against me, sobbing. I held her tight, my hand cradling the back of her head like I had when she was a child. It's okay, I whispered, though my own tears blurred the world. You're safe now. I've got you. But Mason's words cut through the fragile moment. She's not out of the woods yet. She'll have to cooperate fully. Otherwise, he didn't finish, but the implication was clear. The law didn't forgive easily. The next days blurred into a storm of interviews, legal paperwork, and endless waiting rooms with stale coffee. Claire sat through interrogations, her voice breaking as she recounted Monroe's schemes, how he had coaxed her into forging signatures, opening accounts, signing documents she didn't fully understand. Sometimes I sat in the hallway outside, listening to the muffled voices, praying that each answer she gave would bring her closer to freedom. One evening, after another exhausting session, she sank into a plastic chair beside me. I'm scared, Dad, she whispered. I took her hand. So am I. But fear means you're still fighting. And you're not fighting alone. She leaned her head on my shoulder. For the first time in years, she felt like my little girl again. A week later, Mason met me outside the courthouse. She's cooperating. That'll help. But the prosecution's still debating how much responsibility she holds. She could get probation, or she could get years. The words slammed into me like a hammer. I thought saving her from Monroe would be the end of the nightmare. But it was only the beginning. That night, Claire sat across from me at the kitchen table, her face pale, her hands fidgeting. What if they send me to prison, Dad? What if I lose everything? I reached across, steadying her hands with mine. Then I'll be there. Every visiting day, every letter, every call. You won't lose me. Ever. She broke then, sobbing into my chest. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I stroked her hair, feeling the weight of years lift and settle all at once. We'll get through this, one way or another. But deep inside, I knew the hardest fight was still ahead. Because forgiveness was one thing, redemption, true redemption, was another. And the world wasn't sure it was ready to give my daughter either. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and disinfectant. Reporters swarmed the steps outside, their cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward, questions slicing through the air. Is Claire Givens cooperating? Was she a willing accomplice or just another victim? Does Harold Givens forgive his daughter for defrauding him? Every word cut into me, but I didn't answer. I kept my arm firm around Claire's shoulders as we climbed the stairs. She kept her eyes down, her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles turned white. Inside the courtroom, the air was cooler, but heavier. Monroe sat at the defense table, slick as ever in a tailored suit, his smirk playing across his lips as though he owned the room. Even in handcuffs, even surrounded by guards, he radiated arrogance. Claire sat at the witness stand, her voice trembling as the prosecutor guided her through the testimony. Miss Givens, can you explain how Mr. Monroe approached you about your father's finances? She glanced at me, then back to the lawyer. He told me my dad had savings I didn't know about. He said I deserved some of it, that my father would never give it willingly. Her voice cracked. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Monroe leaned back in his chair, grinning like it was a game. The defense attorney rose. Miss Givens, isn't it true you signed documents willingly, that no one forced you to take part in these transactions? Claire's hands shook. Yes, but I didn't know what I was really doing. The lawyer pounced. Didn't know? Or didn't care? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears. I clenched my fists, every instinct screaming to stand up, to shield her from the barrage, but Mason's hand on my shoulder kept me seated. Let her speak, he whispered. Answer the question, Miss Givens, the defense lawyer pressed. Claire's voice broke, but she lifted her chin. I cared. I cared about my dad. I cared about my family. I was stupid. I thought Monroe loved me. I thought he was giving me a way out. But he used me, and I let him. Her words echoed, raw and trembling, yet strong enough to silence the whispers. The judge called a recess shortly after. As the crowd spilled into the hall, Monroe's eyes locked on me. He mouthed a single word. Loser. I turned away. He wasn't worth my rage anymore. That evening, Claire sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same spot where we'd shared so many arguments and silences. Now, the weight of the courtroom clung to her like a second skin. Dad, she whispered, what if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm just like him? I reached for her hands. Then I'll believe you enough for all of them. And I'll keep believing until they see it too. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Why? After everything I did? I thought of Marianne, her gentle wisdom. Family isn't about keeping score. It's about choosing each other, even when it hurts. Because you're my daughter, I said simply. That doesn't change. The next day, Monroe took the stand. His swagger filled the room, his voice smooth as honey. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, his lawyer began, you will see that my client is a successful businessman, unfairly targeted because of envy and misunderstanding. He didn't trick Claire Givens. She sought him out. She wanted the life he could offer. She wanted freedom from her father's control. Gasps rippled through the gallery. My chest burned with fury. Monroe smirked, leaning into the microphone. Claire knew what she was doing. Every signature, every account. She was more than willing. She begged me to show her how the world really worked. I surged halfway to my feet before Mason's firm grip pulled me back down. Don't, he hissed. Claire's face crumpled, her whole body trembling. For a moment, she looked ready to collapse. But then, something shifted. She straightened, her jaw tightening, her eyes locking on Monroe. You're lying, she whispered, though the courtroom noise nearly drowned her. Then louder. You're lying. The judge banged the gavel. Order! But the damage was done. The jury had seen the fire in her eyes, the raw betrayal cutting deeper than any cross-examination could. Afterward, in the courthouse hallway, Claire collapsed against me, sobbing. He'll ruin me, Dad. He'll drag me down with him. I held her, my voice steady. Not if we stand together. He can't take what's already ours. She pulled back, searching my face. What's that? Truth, I said. And family. For the first time, she smiled through her tears. The trial stretched on for weeks. Witness after witness testified, bankers, secretaries, former associates. Each one chipped away at Monroe's facade, revealing the rot beneath his charm. But every day was a battle for Claire, her past mistakes dragged into the light, her loyalty questioned. Some nights she woke screaming, convinced the jury would send her away with him. Other nights, she sat silent at the kitchen table, staring at her hands as if she still saw the ink stains from those forged documents. I sat with her through all of it. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we just shared the silence. And slowly, painfully, I began to see something new in her eyes. Not the reckless hunger that Monroe had fed, but a fragile determination, a spark of the daughter I once knew. Finally, the day of closing arguments came. The prosecutor's voice rang out. Axel Monroe is a predator. He preyed on greed, on insecurity, on the love between a father and daughter. But Claire Givens has chosen to step into the light. She has chosen truth. And now, it's time for justice. The defense tried to twist the narrative, painting Monroe as a mentor and Claire as complicit. But the words fell flat against the mountain of evidence. As the jury filed out to deliberate, Claire turned to me, whispering, "What if they don't see it? What if they think I'm like him?" I pulled her into a hug. "Then we'll face it. Together." And for the first time since the nightmare began, I believed it. Because forgiveness wasn't about erasing what happened. It was about surviving it side by side. The courthouse was silent, except for the creak of wooden benches as people shifted nervously. The jury had been out for 12 long hours, and every tick of the clock had gnawed at my nerves. Claire sat beside me, pale and hollow-eyed, her hands twisting the hem of her sleeve. The doors opened. The bailiff called out, "All rise for the jury." My chest tightened as 12 strangers filed in, their faces unreadable. They carried the weight of our lives in their expressions, and I searched desperately for some sign, pity, anger, mercy, but found only solemnity. The judge cleared his throat. "Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict?" A middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair stood. "We have, Your Honor." The clerk asked the formal question, and her voice rang out steady, unflinching. "On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant, Axel Monroe, guilty." Gasps broke through the gallery. My knees nearly buckled with relief, though I forced myself to stand straighter. On the charge of identity theft, we find the defendant, Axel Monroe, guilty. Monroe sat back in his chair, his smirk gone, his jaw clenched tight. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. The foreperson continued, each word like a hammer striking iron. On the charge of conspiracy, we find the defendant, Axel Monroe, guilty. 3 blows. Final and unforgiving. The judge nodded. "Mr. Monroe, you will be remanded into custody immediately, pending sentencing. Bailiff, take him away." As the guards moved in, Monroe's mask cracked. He snarled, thrashing against their grip. His eyes locked on Claire, venom dripping from every word. "You think this is over? You think he'll forgive you when the cameras are gone? You'll always be a fraud, Claire. Just like me." Claire flinched, tears stinging her eyes. But then, slowly, she straightened her shoulders and met his glare head-on. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm not like you." The bailiffs dragged him out, his curses echoing down the hallway until the heavy doors slammed shut. And just like that, the storm that had nearly destroyed us was over. Outside, the courthouse steps exploded, with noise reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing like lightning. Claire froze, her body stiff against the flood of attention. "Miss Givens, were you complicit in the fraud? Do you feel guilty for betraying your father? Mr. Givens, will you ever trust your daughter again?" I put an arm around her shoulders and guided her down the steps, ignoring the shouts. Mason cleared a path through the crowd, his broad frame shielding us from the chaos. When we finally reached the car, Claire collapsed into the seat, shaking. "They hate me," she whispered. "Even if Monroe's gone, they'll never see me as anything but his puppet." I started the engine, keeping my eyes on the road. "They don't get to decide who you are. That's up to you." Her voice cracked. "But what if I can't undo what I've done?" I reached across, squeezing her hand. "Then we don't undo it. We live through it. We build something new." She stared at me, searching for cracks in my conviction. Finding none, she leaned back, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Weeks later, Monroe was sentenced, 25 years without parole. The headlines called it the fall of a con artist. For a while, our names were everywhere, mine painted as the victim, Claire's painted in shades of doubt. At the grocery store, whispers followed her down every aisle. At the diner, conversations stopped when she walked in. Some neighbors offered sympathetic smiles. Others crossed the street to avoid her. One night, she came home with red-rimmed eyes. "I tried to apply for a job," she confessed. "The manager recognized my name. He said they didn't hire thieves." My heart ached. I wanted to storm down there, to shout the truth until they listened, but I couldn't fight all her battles. "Then we'll find another way," I said gently. Her lip trembled. "Why are you still here for me, Dad? Why didn't you walk away like everyone else?" I thought of Marianne again, her soft voice reminding me, "Love isn't about what's deserved, it's about what's chosen." "Because you're mine," I said simply, "and I choose you, every time." She broke then, falling into my arms, sobbing into my chest. And for the first time in months, I felt hope bloom in the cracks of our broken lives. Spring came slowly that year, the snow melting into muddy rivers, the air filling with the scent of thawed earth. Claire began volunteering at the church pantry, stacking cans and sweeping floors. She said it felt good to be useful, even if no one trusted her yet. I watched her from a distance sometimes, her hair tucked back, her shoulders straighter than before. She wasn't healed. Neither was I. But there was movement, small, fragile steps towards something that might one day be called redemption. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch sipping coffee, she asked, "Do you think people will ever forgive me?" I studied the horizon, the fading light painting the sky in gold. "Maybe, maybe not. But forgiveness from others isn't the point. It's about whether you can forgive yourself." She was quiet a long time before whispering, "I want to. I don't know how yet, but I want to." I reached over, lacing my fingers through hers. "That's enough. Wanting is where it begins." And for the first time since the nightmare began, I let myself believe that our story didn't have to end in ruin, that even in the ashes of betrayal, something new could grow. The weeks after Monroe's sentencing crawled by with a strange mix of relief and unease. The shadow of his schemes was gone, but the scars he left remained. Claire carried them heavier than anyone. She spent mornings combing job boards, afternoons volunteering at the food pantry, evenings sketching quietly at the kitchen table. Art had been her love once, back when Marianne was alive. I remembered her drawings taped on the refrigerator, flowers, houses, the crooked little dog we'd had. Now, her sketches were darker, twisted trees, stormy skies, broken faces searching for light. "Your mother would have loved these," I told her one night, tapping a page where a fragile sapling sprouted from blackened soil. Claire ducked her head. "They're not good enough." "They're honest," I said. "That's better." The town wasn't quick to forget. At church, Whispers still floated whenever we walked in. Some people gave curt nods, others turned away altogether. Claire bore it with a stiff spine, but I saw how her eyes dimmed afterward. One Sunday, Pastor Ellis surprised us. During announcements, he paused and looked straight at Claire. "I want to remind everyone here," he said, "that grace isn't just a word in Scripture. It's something we live. Claire has faced consequences, and she's working to make amends. If we can't offer forgiveness here, then we've misunderstood the heart of our faith." The silence that followed was thick. Claire's face flushed, her eyes dropping to her lap. After service, a few people came up hesitant, smiles, brief words of encouragement. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Not everyone softened. One evening, I found Claire sitting on the porch steps, trembling. A crumpled note lay in her lap, the words scrawled in angry ink. "Thieves don't change! Go back to hiding!" She tried to laugh it off. Guess they still remember me. I crouched beside her, fury simmering low in my chest. Cowards. They didn't even sign their name. But Claire shook her head. "No, Dad. I deserve some of this. I hurt people." I lied. "It's not just about Monroe. I made choices too." Her honesty cut me deeper than the note. She wasn't making excuses anymore. She was facing herself. I took her hand, rough and cold. "Then prove them wrong. Don't fight their hate with hate. Show them you're more than your mistakes." She nodded slowly, eyes brimming with something I hadn't seen in months: resolve. A chance came sooner than expected. The community center lost its art instructor mid-program, and they needed someone to step in for the children's class. Claire hesitated when Mason suggested her. "They won't want me," she said. "Try," Mason urged. "If they say no, fine. But if they say yes, well, maybe you'll find something you've been missing." To my surprise, the director agreed. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was Ellis's influence. Maybe it was a flicker of faith in second chances. The first class was rough. Parents hovered, wary. Kids whispered. But when Claire knelt by a little boy struggling to draw a tree and gently guided his hand, something shifted. Her patience, her quiet encouragement, they reminded me so much of Marianne that I had to step outside for air. By the end of the hour, laughter filled the room. Not all the parents looked convinced, but a few smiled. One even shook Claire's hand. When she came home that night, her face was alight with a joy I hadn't seen in years. "Dad," she breathed. I felt useful. Really useful. I hugged her, my throat tight. "You are. You always were." Healing isn't linear. Some days were victories, others setbacks. There were still doors slammed in her face, still whispers on street corners. But slowly, steadily, something was mending between us. One night, as we sat with mugs of tea, Claire asked the question that had hovered between us since the beginning. "Do you really forgive me, Dad? Not just tolerate me, not just protect me. Truly forgive?" I set my cup down, staring into her searching eyes. "I won't lie," I said. "There are nights I wake up angry, remembering the loans, the betrayal. Forgiveness isn't something that happened once and stayed. It's something I have to choose, over and over. But yes, Claire, I forgive you, because love is bigger than what you did. And I'd rather spend the rest of my life choosing forgiveness than letting resentment rot me from the inside." Her tears spilled fast, but they were different this time, cleansing, not crushing. She wrapped her arms around me, and for the first time since Marianne's death, I felt our family whole again, even if broken in places. Months later, the headlines moved on. The whispers faded. Monroe's name was forgotten, replaced by new scandals, new villains. Claire's art class grew, her sketches brightened. She even sold a few paintings at the local fair, landscapes filled with light, with growing things. One evening, she stood on the porch watching the sunset, her hair caught in the gold. "Dad," she said softly, "do you think Mom would be proud of me?" I swallowed hard. "She already is. She always was." Claire smiled, small but real. "Then I'll keep trying. For her. For you. For me." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and together we watched the sky darken, the first stars peeking out. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was jagged, scarred, stitched together with pain and grace. But it was ours, and as the night settled, I knew one thing with certainty. Even in the ashes of betrayal, seeds of love can take root, and if tended carefully, they will grow. The next season arrived with crisp mornings and leaves that burned orange before tumbling to the ground. Change was in the air, both in the town and in our home. But if autumn reminded me of anything, it was this: transformation is beautiful, but it comes with letting go. For Claire, letting go meant facing people she had wronged directly. Not everyone. Some wounds were too deep, too tangled in Monroe's web. But a few names stood out: neighbors she'd borrowed from, families she'd lied to. "Dad," she said one morning, nerves written plain across her face, "I want to apologize. In person. Not letters. Not excuses. Just face to face." I studied her carefully. There was no tremor of performance in her voice, no hunger for sympathy, just the weight of responsibility pressing down. "Then do it," I said. "But be ready, they may not forgive. Not now, maybe not ever." "I know," she whispered. "But it's not about what they give me. It's about what I need to give back." Go. The first visit was to the Thompsons. Their eldest boy had lost a scholarship after Claire misled them into co-signing a loan. When we knocked, the door creaked open just far enough for Mrs. Thompson's face to appear. Her eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" Claire's voice wavered, but she didn't back down. "To say I'm sorry. I can't undo what I did. I know I cost your son opportunities, trust, peace. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to hear me say it. I was wrong." The silence stretched painfully. Finally, Mrs. Thompson's lips pressed tight. "We don't want your apologies. Not today. Maybe not ever." The door clicked shut. Claire stood frozen. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "That took courage," I murmured. Her chin trembled. "It felt like nothing." "No," I said. "It was everything. Not every door slammed." When she visited Mrs. Kelly, the widow who had lost savings to Monroe's schemes, the reaction was different. The old woman listened quietly, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "I know what you did," Mrs. Kelly said softly. "But I also know what he did to you. Maybe you chose wrong, but you're not him. Don't let his shadow keep you from finding your light." She reached forward, grasped Claire's hand, and squeezed. Claire cried, and so did I, though I pretended it was just dust in my eye. Through it all, I found myself reflecting on my own road. I was nearing 70. My joints ached in the mornings, my breath caught after mowing the lawn. Marianne was gone. Most of my old friends were too. I thought often of legacy. What would I leave behind when it was my turn to go? For years I'd assumed it would be my reputation. the steady life I built, the example of an honest man. But life doesn't let us choose how people remember us. Sometimes it's the mistakes that echo louder than the virtues. Watching Claire, I realized something. My legacy wasn't the life I'd lived alone. It was the life I continued to shape with her. If she could rise from this, if she could rebuild, then maybe that was the truest thing I could leave behind. Not perfection, but resilience. Not pride, but love. One evening, Mason came over with a casserole. He'd become something of a fixture, dropping by with small kindnesses, lending a hand with repairs. He and Claire spoke more now, though carefully, like skittish animals circling each other. Over dinner, he said, "The community center is starting an outreach project. We want to bring art into the nursing homes, maybe paint murals with the kids. Claire, would you consider leading it?" Her fork paused midair. "Me? Why not you?" he asked. "You've got the skill, and you've got the story. People listen more to someone who's been through the fire." I saw doubt flicker in her eyes, but also a spark of longing. "I'll think about it," she murmured. After Mason left, she sat quiet by the window. "Do you think I could do something like that?" she asked. "Yes," I said simply. She turned to me. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything," I replied. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Claire accepted the role, tentative at first, then slowly with more confidence. I tagged along to watch as she guided children with brushes and paints, their laughter ringing off sterile nursing home walls. The old residents smiled, some joining in with shaky hands. One man, a veteran with clouded eyes, whispered as Claire helped him draw a flag. "Haven't painted since I was a boy." "Then today's the perfect day to start again," she told him gently. Something in her voice broke open a dam in me. This was her gift. This was where she belonged. And though it took heartbreak to find it, maybe this was the path Marianne had always seen for her. But the road was not without shadows. One evening, as I was locking up, I noticed an envelope shoved under the door. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "You can play teacher all you want, but we don't forget. A snake stays a snake." I felt the old anger rise, hot and corrosive. But I didn't show Claire. Not this time. She didn't need more ghosts. Instead, I burned the note in the fireplace and watched the ash scatter. Forgiveness wasn't universal. Maybe it never would be. But if Claire kept moving forward, step by painful step, maybe the voices of grace would grow louder than the whispers of hate. That night, as Claire sketched another sapling sprouting from broken earth, she glanced at me. "You're quiet, Dad. What's on your mind?" I hesitated. Then I said, "I'm thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind." She tilted her head. "And what do you think yours will be?" I looked at her, at the woman who had stumbled, fallen, nearly destroyed us both, yet was rising again with trembling hands and stubborn will. "My legacy," I said softly, "is sitting right in front of me." Her eyes filled, but she smiled. A real, steady smile. And in that moment I knew the long road back was still ahead. But we were walking it together. It was a quiet Sunday morning when the letter arrived. The kind of morning when the world feels at peace. Coffee brewing, bird song filtering through the window, the faint hum of a lawnmower down the block. I almost didn't notice the envelope slipped among the bills and advertisements. It wasn't marked with a return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Monroe. For a long moment, I just stood there, fingers trembling. Then I slid it into my jacket pocket, unopened. Claire was still upstairs, humming softly to herself as she organized her art supplies. I should have burned it. Tossed it straight into the fireplace, let the smoke carry away the poison. But curiosity is a cruel master. That evening, when she was out leading another mural session, I sat at the kitchen table, pulled the letter free, and unfolded it. Harold, time is a funny thing in here. It stretches, bends, gives a man plenty of hours to think about choices, mistakes, and opportunities. Don't fool yourself into believing you've won. Claire is still mine. She always will be. She has my blood on her hands, my voice in her head. You can dress her up in charity and paint, but snakes don't become doves. They shed their skin and wait. Tell her I'm waiting. Tell her she owes me. The paper shook in my hands. My first instinct was fury. I wanted to tear it to pieces. But beneath that, a darker fear gnawed. What if he was right? What if his shadow clung to her forever? I crumpled the letter and shoved it deep into the trash. Claire never needed to see it. Not now. Not when she was finally finding her footing. But Monroe was never a man who relied on just one move. A week later, Claire came home, pale, trembling. I got a letter, she whispered, clutching a similar envelope. From him. My stomach dropped. What did it say? She pressed it into my hands, refusing to read it again. The words inside were shorter, sharper, like knives thrown in the dark. Claire, do you really think they'll forgive you? That painting walls makes you clean? I made you who you are. Without me, you're nothing. Don't forget, blood ties deeper than guilt. She collapsed into the chair, head in her hands. Dad, I thought I was moving forward. I thought, you are. I cut in firmly. This is his game. He wants to drag you back into his pit. Don't let him. But what if he's right? Her voice cracked. What if I can't ever escape what I did with him? I reached across the table, gripped her hands. Listen to me. You're not him. You made mistakes, yes. But you're not chained to them unless you choose to be. He doesn't own you anymore. Her eyes lifted, wide and desperate. Then what do I do? You keep walking forward, I said. One step, one day at a time. And if he writes again, we burn it. But the letters didn't stop. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, another envelope arrived. Some praised her, twisting her guilt into flattery. Others threatened, hinting at debts unpaid. They were poison in different doses, but poison all the same. At first, Claire resisted. She refused to open them, leaving them to me. I burned them in the backyard, watching the ashes scatter into the wind. But the weight still hung over us, like smoke that clings to your skin long after the fire's out. One night, she broke. I can't live like this, Dad. Always waiting for the next letter. Always wondering what he'll say next. Then stop letting him have that power, I told her. Her voice was ragged. How? I thought for a long moment. Then I said, you write back. She stared at me as though I'd gone mad. What? Not to him, I clarified. To yourself. Every time he sends a letter, you write your own. You answer not to him, but to the girl who once believed his lies. Tell her what you've learned. Tell her who you are now. Slowly, something shifted in her expression, a spark of defiance. The next day, when another envelope arrived, she didn't hand it to me. Instead, she sat down at her desk, tore it open, read every venomous word, and then picked up her pen. Her reply was not mailed. It was folded into a journal she began to keep. Pages filled quickly letters to her younger self, to me, even to Marianne. Words of pain, yes, but also words of growth. "I'm not your pawn," she wrote one evening. "I'm not your victim. I am not nothing. I am me." And for the first time, I believed she meant it. Meanwhile, Monroe's influence stretched beyond letters. Whispers stirred in town. He had friends on the outside, loyalists who carried his threats. A broken window at the community center. A note scrawled in chalk on the sidewalk. "We see you." Claire stiffened when she saw it, but instead of retreating, she picked up a bucket, filled it with water, and scrubbed the words away herself. "They don't get to own the ground I walk on," she said firmly. It was in that moment I realized something powerful. She was no longer hiding behind me. She was fighting for herself. Yet even as she grew stronger, I could feel the toll on her spirit. Some nights, she sat awake, staring out the window. I'd join her, offering silent company. "Do you think he'll ever stop?" she asked one night. I sighed. "Men like him, they don't stop. Not until the grave." Her face was pale in the moonlight. "Then maybe that's the day I'll finally breathe." I wanted to tell her she didn't have to wait that long. That freedom wasn't about him, it was about her. But the words caught in my throat, because part of me feared she was right. Weeks later, we received word. Monroe had filed for an appeal. The thought of him out of prison again was almost unbearable. Claire trembled when she heard, but then she lifted her chin. "Then I'll face him," she said. I searched her eyes, looking for fear. But what I saw was something else. Resolve. For the first time since this nightmare began, I believed she could. That night, I dreamt of Marianne. She stood in the kitchen, hands dusted with flour, smiling softly. "She's stronger than you think," she whispered. When I woke, I believed it. The shadow of Monroe was still with us, but it no longer defined us. Claire was walking forward, step by step, her own person now. And though the road ahead promised battles yet to come, for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to hold on to. Hope. The courthouse smelled the same as it had the day of Monroe's sentencing. Faintly of polish and dust, mingled with the nervous sweat of everyone forced to sit in judgment. As I walked through the heavy doors with Claire by my side, I could feel her hand trembling against mine. She was older now, stronger than the broken girl who had once clung to his every word. But the air inside these walls threatened to strip her of all that progress. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the shuffle of lawyers and spectators. "What if he wins?" I stopped and turned to her. "Then we fight again. But today, you're not alone. Not anymore." Her eyes searched mine, and I saw the flicker of determination return. Monroe was brought in, shackled, but still carrying himself like a man who believed he was the one in charge. His hair had thinned, his skin paled, but his eyes, those sharp, unrelenting eyes, were exactly the same. When he saw Claire, he smiled. Not warm, not soft. A smile of possession. She flinched, but didn't look away. For the first time, she met his gaze and held it. The hearing began with legal jargon, motions and counter-motions that blurred into a hum. But I heard every word Monroe's lawyer spoke. Unfair trial, insufficient evidence, rehabilitation prospects, lies dressed in legal cloth. And then Monroe himself was allowed to speak. He rose, his chains clinking faintly. His voice carried the same old charm, polished smooth by years of manipulation. "I admit my past was Imperfect, he began, as though talking about a bad business deal. But I have paid my dues. I have reflected, repented, and most of all, I long to reunite with my daughter, to be the father she deserves. The audacity made my blood boil. But beside me, Claire sat stiff, her fists clenched in her lap. When Monroe looked directly at her, his voice softened. A performance just for her. Claire, sweetheart, you know I've always loved you. You know they twisted the truth. They made you believe you were something broken, when you've always been my pride. Don't you want to heal? Don't you want to be a family again? For a moment, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. I could feel every pair of eyes shift toward Claire. And then she stood. The judge frowned. Miss, please remain. But Claire's voice rang out, steady and clear. Number, I need to say this. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Very well. Briefly. Claire turned, not to the judge, not to the lawyer, but straight to Monroe. You don't get to call me sweetheart anymore, she said, her voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. You don't get to own me, or my choices, or my past. You used me. You filled my head with poison. And yes, I made mistakes because of you. I hurt people because I believed your lies. But I am not your pride. I am not your puppet. I am done with you. Her words cracked through the silence like lightning. Monroe's smile faltered just for a fraction of a second. You think you're free, he sneered, his voice slipping. But you'll always carry me inside you. Maybe, she said. But carrying a scar isn't the same as carrying chains. You don't get to chain me anymore. The courtroom erupted, murmurs, gasps, the judge banging his gavel. Order was restored only with difficulty. But in that moment, I felt something powerful. Claire had spoken the truth, not just for herself, but for all of us who had lived in Monroe's shadow. The judge dismissed Monroe's petition swiftly, almost curtly. This appeal is denied. The conviction stands. The defendant will remain in state custody. The chains were led away, dragging Monroe back to the life he had made for himself. But as he passed us, he leaned close enough that I could hear his whisper. This isn't over. I stared him down, letting him see no fear. Yes, it is. Outside the courthouse, Claire collapsed against me, shaking. But it wasn't weakness, it was release. Tears streamed down her face, and she laughed, wild and ragged. I did it, she gasped. Dad, I actually said it. I told him. I hugged her tight, feeling her heartbeat hammering against mine. You did more than that, I said softly. You cut the cord. For the first time in years, I saw her shoulders lift as though a weight had been thrown off. She wasn't healed completely, not yet, but she was no longer bound. The weeks that followed felt different. The letters stopped. The whispers faded. Monroe's shadow didn't vanish overnight, but it began to thin, like fog burning away under the sun. One evening, Claire and I stood together at the edge of the mural she'd painted. It was finished now, a great sweeping tree, its branches reaching outward, leaves exploding in color. Beneath it, figures of different ages, races and faces, joined hands in a circle. Roots and wings, she murmured, tracing the trunk with her finger. That's what you gave me, Dad. Roots, and now, finally, wings. I swallowed the lump in my throat. No, Claire, you gave them to yourself. She smiled, radiant in the glow of the setting sun. And for the first time in so long, I felt that maybe, just maybe, we could live in light, not shadow. But even as peace settled over us, a small part of me remained vigilant. Because men like Monroe didn't vanish. They lingered, like echoes in old halls. The difference now was this: Claire wasn't afraid of echoes anymore. And neither was I. The cemetery was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that wrapped around you like a blanket instead of pressing down like a weight. The grass was freshly cut, the air cool and sweet, with the scent of lilacs drifting from the edge of the property. I walked slowly, the cane tapping against the stone path, until I reached the familiar headstone. Marianne Givens, beloved wife, mother, friend. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Morning, Marianne," I said softly. My voice always sounded strange here, too loud, too human, against the stillness of stone and earth. Beside me, Claire knelt, placing a bouquet of daisies, Marianne's favorite, against the base of the headstone. She brushed the grass with her hand, smoothing it the way she used to smooth her mother's hair when she was a child. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "It's been a while, but I think I've finally got something worth telling you." The years had been kinder than I once thought they could be. Monroe had vanished into the machinery of the prison system, his name reduced to little more than a docket number. There were no more letters, no more appeals. But the shadow he had cast didn't vanish overnight. Healing, I learned, is less like a wound closing and more like a scar forming. It takes time, and even when it's done, the mark remains. Claire bore her scar openly now. She had finished school, taking night classes while working at the community art center. Her mural had grown into an entire series, each one bolder than the last, each one speaking to survival and hope. She even had her first gallery showing last fall, the room filled with strangers who saw beauty where she had once only seen shame. And me? I learned to let go of the guilt I had carried like an anchor. For so long, I had believed that every choice she made under Monroe's spell was somehow my fault, that I had failed to protect her. But Claire had taught me something. Parents give roots, but children must grow their own wings. Claire sat back on her heels, eyes closed, her lips moving silently. I didn't interrupt. Whatever she was saying to her mother was hers alone. After a while, she stood and slipped her arm through mine. "Dad," she said quietly, "can I tell you what I told her?" "Of course." She smiled faintly, her eyes misting. "I told her I'm not afraid anymore. I told her I finally know who I am. And I told her I forgave him." The words startled me, though they shouldn't have. "You forgave Monroe?" She nodded. "Not for him. He doesn't deserve it. But for me. Because carrying hate was just another kind of chain. And I'm tired of chains." I studied her face, older now, stronger, but carrying that same spark Marianne used to have when she set her mind to something. "You sound like your mother," I said, my throat tight. Claire laughed softly. "Best compliment you could have given me." We lingered a while longer, sharing stories, laughter, even a few tears. When we finally turned to leave, the sun was climbing higher, spilling light over the headstones like a blessing. On the drive home, Claire turned the radio low and leaned back in her seat. "Do you ever think about what life might have been like if he hadn't come along?" she asked. I kept my eyes on the road. "Sometimes, but then I remember wondering doesn't change what happened. What matters is what we build now." She nodded slowly. "Then let's build something good." And in her voice I heard not the frightened girl I'd once pulled from Monroe's grasp, but a woman who had chosen her own path. Months later, I stood at the back of a crowded hall as Claire unveiled her latest work. a massive canvas of a tree whose branches reached so high they seemed to burst beyond the frame. In its roots, names were carved: Marianne, Harold, Claire, anchoring it firmly to the earth. And in its branches, a flock of birds took flight. The crowd applauded, but I barely heard them. My eyes were on my daughter, standing in front of her creation, her head high, her voice clear as she spoke about transformation, resilience, and freedom. When she finished, she looked for me in the crowd. Our eyes met, and she smiled radiant, unburdened. And in that moment, I knew Monroe had no power here. Not anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I still think of the man. I wonder if he sits alone in his cell, replaying the games he once played, clinging to the illusion of control. I wonder if he knows that the chains he tried to bind Claire with had turned into the very fuel for her freedom. But mostly, I don't think of him at all. I think of my wife, whose love carried us through. I think of my daughter, who learned to fly. And I think of the quiet, steady truth I've come to believe. Family isn't defined by blood alone. It's defined by love, by the courage to choose one another again and again, even when shadows fall. Claire chose me. I chose her. And together, we stepped into the light. Roots and wings. That was enough.